Hey everyone, my name is Mariana, and I am the host of the Commitment to Growth podcast, as well as the founder of the resilience life coaching platform, Commitment to Growth. This is a personal growth-oriented space dedicated to helping ambitious young adults who want to develop long-lasting resilience in their personal, professional, and social lives. I coach on all things mindset development, reframing limiting thought patterns, habit building, vulnerability, and emotional freedom techniques, and more, all through evidence-based practice and lots of raw and honest conversation. Thank you so much for being here, and let's dive right in. We are here with another exciting guest interview on the Commitment to Growth podcast, everybody. Thank you for being here. If you're new, welcome. And if you're not new, welcome back. And if you are new here, I cannot think of a better conversation to introduce to you commitment to growth with, the quality of people and human beings that are on this platform and that I've had the opportunity to connect with. I think that this conversation is so highlighting of that and what I love to talk about and the quality of conversations that I just love bringing to you and getting into flow with myself. These interviews and this platform as a whole always reminds me of why I do what I do. It solidifies it in my heart every single time I start a recording, every time I end the recording, and continue seeing the work of the person who was just here on social media. Truly, between having the gift to talk to the people that I get to talk to, but also the amount of support that I feel every single day, week, month from all of you here that tune in and follow the podcast and follow the platform and support it and comment and like, and all of the love that you pour into what this platform has become is just everywhere around me right now, and it carries me so much, and I just want to say thank you. Whether you, again, it's your first time here or you've been following me. I don't have a team yet. I am the team for now. For a while, you are so appreciated and you are so loved in your presence here. So, this conversation was so juicy. If you're into neuroscience, whether you're a beginner or you have a master's in neuroscience, whatever level of the spectrum you sit on, this conversation was all of that. But I loved that it was applied neuroscience, it was applied psychology, it was applied evidence-based practice of mindfulness as to how it impacts so many of the realms in our life. Let me tell you about today's guest. I have been following Kelsey's work for about a year now. Kelsey actually duetted one of my TikTok videos last summer. It was probably the first video of mine on TikTok to ever get into at a certain point, it reaches 10K and it just says 10K, you can't see the rest of the numbers anymore. It's pinned at the top of my profile on TikTok if you want to see it. It's on grief and growing pains, and she duetted it and was just hyping me up so much, this girl that I did not even know. So I checked out her profile and saw all the amazing work she was doing, and I was like, I need to follow her. I need to know what she's doing. I need to know how she's doing what she's doing, because truly the message behind everything that Kelsey embodies through her work, through her life, how she shows up on social media is so contagious in the most amazing way. And it has inspired me so much to be so intentional about mindfulness in my own life. So Kelsey is in the final stages of her Master's of Arts in Counselling Psychology, none other, and is the owner of KMOSSYOGA. With a background in concussion research, mental health, and neurophysiology, Kelsey bridges the gap between modern neuroscience and yoga by teaching the mechanisms through which mindfulness changes the brain. As a registered yoga teacher, she is a firm believer in prioritizing mental and physical well-being for improving ourselves, communities, and corporations. After suffering from debilitating anxiety for years, Kelsey turned to mindfulness and yoga and experienced firsthand the benefits studied in the scientific literature. Drawing on her education and experience in psychology and mental health, combined with a relentless drive to connect with and help others, we love that here, she created Neuro-Informed Yoga and Mindfulness, NIYM, through workshops, group programs, and public speaking engagements. NIYM, or Neuro-Informed Yoga and Mindfulness, is an approach to wellness designed to educate and teach people how to live a more peaceful, informed, and meaningful life with ease. Key word right there, because we should be striving for nothing less in our day-to-day life. So if that bio, if that overview of this incredible person, this incredible woman was not enough, this was also her first podcast interview ever. By the way, may I highlight the privilege that I feel I hold being the one to be the recipient of her first podcast interview. She killed it. I never would have thought. And I mean, they're just conversations anyways, but Kelsey showed up so beautifully, exactly as she does in the outside world. And I am so excited for you to hear this conversation. Grab a book, grab a pen if you're a yogi. This is going to be a song to you. And if you're not yet, I hope this inspires you to explore movement through yoga and its benefits on mindfulness. So, one more thing before we get into the episode today is the announcement that if you didn't hear this in the last episode, I am taking submissions for my coaching bundles. I'm a resilience coach. As I mentioned in the intro to this episode, I am focused on vulnerability coaching. If you feel like you have vulnerability blocks, imposter syndrome, you feel like you've been in circles trying to go after your goals, but you keep failing, you keep stopping, you keep reaching dead ends, and at this point, you're super disappointed with yourself around the progress that doesn't feel like you're making, I'm your gal. If you're interested, if you want that one-on-one help, if you want that accountability, if you want help that is centered around focusing on the internal blocks that you might not even know you have, but might be keeping you from achieving the things that you want to achieve, I'm your girl, as I said. So head on over. It is www.commitmenttogrowth.com/coaching-services. It is also linked in the show description of this episode. Go there. You can check out resilience coaching, the evidence-based approach that I take, and book a free first call. They're 30 minutes. They can go up to 30 minutes or less. We'll chat about you. We'll chat about what you're looking for from coaching, get to know each other a little bit, and then from there, I'll kind of tell you how I think I can help you because I want to help you. This is a service-based platform. I'm here to help you. I'm here to grow with you and grow from you as well. So if you're interested, you might also just get a discount because that is being offered right now too. So head on over. The link is in the description at the very bottom, and let's work together. So without further ado, here is Kelsey's episode. Kelsey, welcome to the Commit to Growth podcast. This is her first podcast, everyone.
I know. Isn't that
what
wild?
the heck? That is wild. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I am great. I am so happy to be here. And honestly, after listening to something, this is a good combo, you and I feel like.
We clicked right away. This was awesome.
Right?
This was awesome. I have so much to ask you and so much I want to talk to you about. But do you want to tell the audience who you are, what you do, why you do what you do before
All
that?
Yeah,
all
absolutely. So again, my name is Kelsey Moss. I am the owner of KMOSSYOGA and the founder of what's called Neuro-Informed Yoga and Mindfulness. So it's basically, my background is in concussion rehab and neurofeedback. And so I'm also in my master's in counseling psych. And so this program, obviously teaching yoga as well. And so this program is really like the combination of everything I do, where it's like a self-growth educational yoga program. It's kind of an all-in-one 12-week program. Then I also do workshops and courses as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I teach yoga. I'm finishing up my master's and now I do podcasts, I guess.
Oh, now she does. That is, oh my gosh. I'm so curious, like what got you yoga and counseling psych? Like what was your journey into combining those two things?
Oh my goodness. That's such a long story. Like it's such a long thing, but I love it. So
we want to hear it. We want to hear it.
Love it. That's what we're here for, right?
Exactly.
We're here to connect. We're talking about it. So like I said, my background's in concussion rehab, but my whole experience with this stuff really goes back farther. So I also have a very personal experience when it comes to yoga and when it comes to mindfulness, and a very personal reason for why a lot of this really came to be. And I will say there is a trigger warning in this topic, but I always put it out there. Working in mental health, that's out there.
Of course.
Of course. And so my experience with yoga, I've been practicing for about over 10 years now. Just, as one does, starts to, oh, well, my body hurts, that you should probably stretch more and get into that whole thing.
Yeah.
that kid that was in like multiple sports growing up, and so my body always ached. So
Yeah.
you get it.
I do
Yeah.
get it. Yeah.
From there, I ended up going to university, did my undergrad in like a BSc in psych, a bachelor's science, and then I focused it on cognition and brain sciences because I was huge into the sciences. And in my second year of university, I ended up volunteering in a few different research labs on campus. So
Okay.
also UVic,
Oh,
represent.
nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I was volunteering on a couple neuroscience labs just because I loved the brain and I love the brain imaging and everything to do with that.
Yeah.
And then I also ended up volunteering on a concussion project that was at a private psychology clinic, and they were doing what's called QEEGs. So quantitative electroencephalogram, big word, just looking at the patterns in the brain, basically.
Fantastic. Okay.
So yeah, looking at the brain, the activity in the brain and the patterns in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the really that was where I just dove headfirst right into the neuro stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In this clinic, they were not only looking at like what areas the brain are getting injured from concussions, but they were really also focusing on like how that impacts a person. So, for example, like if there's different areas of the brain are responsible for the most part for different things.
Mm-hmm.
You injure certain areas, how does that affect like your mental health? How does that affect your irritability, your ability to focus, how you pick up on social cues, right? Those things that you don't always think of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then they were actually helping doing neurofeedback to retrain the brain into kind of healing those injuries.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
Yeah.
that was like my exposure into the neuro world. Did that, right? Like loved it. Volunteered at first, did a summer internship thereafter, hired on after I graduated my undergrad. I was there for 5 years total.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. So it was
Gotcha.
a big,
It was your whole
uh,
world.
it was awesome.
Yeah,
And
totally.
I was, yeah, it was like, okay. So I was really, really fortunate for who I was working for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's actually now passed away.
Oh, okay.
He was
Mhm.
one of like the go-to people in Canada for these brain maps, for reading them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's good that you got that time with him and you got to like mentor under him. That's amazing. But I'm sorry, like it's a tough loss for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky that I actually got my own brain map done, my own QEG done when I was
Oh
there.
my gosh.
It
Yeah.
was fun.
Love that.
I still have the report that came
Okay.
up.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, basically I was doing that for all the neuro stuff. I decided I wanted a lot more to do with mental health after, not just the neuro. I didn't want to kind of pigeonhole myself in just that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's when I did the counseling psych because I love people and I love the connection.
Yeah.
And I mean, even
Totally.
this, right?
And you get to make it evidence-based from that neuro perspective. Yeah. Totally.
Exactly.
Oh,
And so really took the counseling psych route.
cool.
But then, COVID happens and I decided to take my yoga teacher training. So
Oh, it was during
um,
COVID that
it
you
was during COVID. I also had a broken arm.
Whoa.
This is my fun little,
You had a broken
my,
arm? Is that what you said?
yeah. I did my entire 200-hour on a broken arm.
Oh my God.
Fun facts about
Wow.
Kelsey.
I respect
So
that. Oh my
thank
gosh.
you. Appreciate
I
it.
love that. I love that. Okay.
So that was really like what I don't know. So when it kind of came to yoga, it really started out as obviously like a physical thing. And
Mhm.
throughout my undergrad and then after, I just fell in love with how good it made me feel. And then through my master's, recognizing like how much it can change the brain, how much that the brain, like how malleable the brain is, right? And so
Mhm.
that was really like being in the concussion rehab. Like we were doing stroke rehabilitation, concussion rehabilitation, just general mental health stuff, like helping people with any kind of issues that they're kind of coming in for.
Mhm.
Anxiety, depression, ADHD is a big one, right? And so just seeing how people can change their brains just
Mhm.
really like shaped my vision, like my worldview on this. And the biggest frustration I found was that there's not really a connection between like the literature and the psych world and the neuro world and the general public.
Mhm. Can you elaborate on that a
Yeah,
little bit, please?
sure. Why not?
Why
So
not? This is my
So
bread and butter. Like neuro, I spend hours and hours reading all things. Like I'm reading a book on, I'm listening to an audiobook, I should say, on uh neurofeedback.
yes,
Yes. The stuff they're doing then at the Brain Institute, the Trauma Institute in the States. The name of the what's the name of the psychiatrist who wrote How the Body Keeps the Score? Bessel van der Kolk. Have you read his book?
yes, yeah,
Amazing. He's
yeah,
part with people who are doing that stuff, and they're doing it at
yeah.
his institute now. Anyways, all that to say, I
Love
just I
it.
nerd out about this, so I want to nerd out with you.
Well, that's what I was doing. So like
Yeah.
I was working
Oh.
actually under a psychologist and I was doing the neurofeedback with clients. So I was sitting there one-on-one, attaching
Oh.
the electrodes onto the brain,
Yeah.
going to them. I was doing the brain maps themselves. And I was
Yeah.
really fortunate, like with that mentor that I was working under, that he would even let me sit on a lot of the intakes and a lot of the like when we would
Mm.
go over the brain maps. And so I'd be there and get to really explore like what it was, like what was going on in the brain. And he could kind of pinpoint and be like, okay, well, you probably have issues with this. This might be a struggle for you, have all this stuff. And then it feels like someone's just like reading your mind. Like it feels so weird. You're like, how do you know that? Like, but it's in the brain, right?
Yes. Oh
Like
my God.
they're looking at your brain and recognizing like how it's behaving is based on how it is behaving, right? Like,
The body absolutely keeps the score,
yeah.
honestly. Oh, I love that.
So, but the issue is I was finding is like even talking about neurofeedback, it's huge in the States, big a lot of places overseas, but it's not big in
Hmm.
Canada. It
No.
is growing and I like that. And it's really good to see.
Hmm.
Still, like most people don't know what it is, and they don't even sometimes recognize how influential your habits, the way you speak to yourself, just your everyday environment, how impactful it is on the structure, the physical architecture of your brain.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that everyone talks about how like trauma hurts the brain, trauma changes your brain, all this stuff changes your brain, right? But sometimes it's like, well, healing does too. And yoga
Hmm.
does, mindfulness does,
Yeah.
and in ways that we actually had no idea until the last like 20, 30 years. It's
Hmm.
in the Western world. Let me clarify. We only really knew this in some of the Western, within Western medicine within the last 20 to 30 years.
Hmm.
If you
Gotcha.
extend it to kind of the 50s, yes, it was kind of starting to build, right? But or sorry, pardon me, 50 or so years ago, it was starting to go gain momentum.
Yeah.
But if you think people are really starting to recognize the importance of that, especially with social media and like having the access to that information,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you found the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Well, and it's one of those things that I think you don't you don't want to believe at first when somebody tells you like your brain can change actually from a traumatic event, but then like I feel like it's only in Western culture that we've adopted the mind is not separate from the body and vice versa. So I think with that awareness has come the adoption of that more holistic approach to things. But I'm happy that you're bringing this up because like one of the main points in that book that I'm listening to is that so many of the traditional approaches to healing trauma, talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy fail on subjects who have gone through like you know insurmountable amounts of trauma from childhood because their brains have wired differently and will not respond to simply affirmations or talking to them. Like there has to be some kind of neurological intervention, whether it's through, I think it's they were using like beta.
Brainwave?
Yes, brainwaves. Thank you. That was the word.
Yes.
Which I was like, man,
Yeah.
like how many people could use that today and are missing out on it because they think that it's a problem that you work through talking, but it's actually
Yeah.
a structure based thing that has to be approached holistically, right? But mm-hmm, yeah.
And it's bang, you're bang on there, right? Like the way that your brain is working day in and day out is going to be based on your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Yeah.
you look at child development, like it goes back to when you are first born. When you're crying as an infant, how are the people around you responding to that?
Yeah.
Are they showing you that emotions are a bad thing, that you're not supposed to feel them?
Yeah.
And your brain will start to wire to be like, oh, I'm not supposed to feel fear. I'm not supposed to feel anger. I'm not supposed to feel
Mm-hmm.
happiness. Like that can really change how the connection, like how people react to everything in their life, and how that your brain develops changes how you see the world, because you don't see with your eyes, you see with your brain, right? Information is always processed in your brain.
I love that. I've never thought about it that way. That's so valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that a lot because, I think something that became very popular in the last like year or two was, the conversation on attachment styles, right?
Mhm.
Like anxious, avoidant, disorganized, secure. The goal is to get to secure for everybody, right? But I think that what a lot of people like the gap is that everybody can explain it from a behavioral approach. Like when you're anxious, you require affirmation constantly. When you're avoidant, you don't want that so much. But nobody talks about like, well, few people talk about, I should say,
Mhm.
the depth at which that attachment is rooted in your nervous system, and that's what you have to heal, not simply it's one thing to talk yourself out of that anxiousness of like wanting to text your significant other or whatever, but
Yeah.
it's another to like look inwards and tell your nervous system that to get yourself out of that state.
Yeah.
So
And
mhm,
it's hard. And I
it's so
think that's
hard.
the biggest thing. And I think people, I mean, there was this understanding years and years ago
Mhm,
that once you return 25, you have your brain, that's it. Like, tough luck, that's your brain, good luck with life. And that's
mhm,
not right. Like, we've started to, I mean, we would, even in that clinic, we'd work a lot with like ex-Olympians, ex-NHL players, like people who were years, decades, sometimes post-concussion, and we could still see the specific areas in the brain for the most part that were injured.
mhm,
And
mhm.
that starts to show how the brain is impacted, right? And when you
Okay.
kind of talk about the trauma and you talk about attachment styles, oftentimes the piece that gets left out, you hear it's really big in pop culture. It seems like pop psych, whatever you want to call it, but
Okay.
with emotion regulation and that
Mhm,
regulation stuff, right? And I talk about it and I recognize that, but I think sometimes people don't often realize how tuned into our health, like how much our ability to have awareness and regulation within our emotions and within our body impacts us on a day to day.
mhm. Totally. Oh, I love that, and I love that you're speaking about it from this holistic approach because I have a lot to ask you on that front. Tell us about tell us about so um are you doing like a thesis in your master's? Like you're doing research-based master's or
Yeah, so this one isn't actually a thesis based, which one of the reasons I chose it. So it is in Masters of Arts. It
okay,
is a 2.5 year program, but it is more course based. And then
gotcha.
I'm in my practicum right now. So right now I am actually working as a therapist, seeing clients,
Oh, I love that.
having fun,
That's so
seeing the
exciting.
things, learning all the things. And
Totally. Yeah.
I think that's where the big thing is, like there's a very big difference between teaching and teaching yoga and counseling. And they're very different because when you're
Okay.
teaching, it's more that like that leadership kind of style. Like it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
I'm running you with education. And that's where like all the courses I teach, even especially with yoga, that is the framework
Mm-hmm.
that like within yoga, because I mean, we didn't have online courses when no, like yoga is thousands and thousands of years old. These were texts that were interpreted and needed people to pass this knowledge down.
Mm-hmm.
And so counseling is very different. Counseling is a lot more of experiencing what the client is experiencing with them and holding their hand and being there with them. And a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
talk about how just that therapeutic relationship is most of what really encourages change or really produces change. It's the
Mm-hmm.
relationship, it's the connection. Because
Totally. Yeah.
hurt, trauma, whatever you want to call it, happens in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so does healing. You can't
Uh-huh.
heal always on your own. You need those connections.
Yes, totally. And it's a very important lens to draw on that because I find that predominantly Western culture is quite individualistic in that sense. Like there's a lot of, do the inner work on your own, heal yourself on your own. And there's a lot of pride that is claimed to be derived from that. And like there's a lot of confidence that can come from that, but it can't be like totally done in isolation, is my point of view personally.
Yeah.
Um, I love the distinction that you drew between being a teacher and a counselor. What what have you found in your research as far as, yoga and its effect and mindfulness and its effects on like mental health and such, and how are you bringing that into both practices?
So I guess that's one of the exciting things where I'm really on the floor. And I think that's what I really wanted to position myself as is I'm not in the lab doing this work, but I have the experience in the lab and I more again in the concussion side,
Okay.
but also being my master's just understanding the literature in ways that a lot of people, unless you have taken degrees that require you to understand scientific literature, you don't have that understanding of it, right? And so a big part of what my goal is really bringing everything together. I'm bringing that yoga side, bringing the psych side, bringing the neuro side and the counseling, and just merging it all together.
Totally. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. What has the literature told you? Or like how are you applying, well, some of the literature that you
The
read to
research.
what you're doing?
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Well, where do we begin? Well,
Where do
this
we
is what I
begin?
do, right? And I think that's the biggest part where
Yeah.
my predominant, so NIM is what I call it, Neuro-Informed Yoga and Mindfulness,
Yeah.
NIM. It is a 12-week program because there's so much information. And so
Yeah.
even for that program, like I start off by explaining like, this is your brain, this is your nervous system. These areas are often involved in this is involved in that. But I also tie the yoga philosophy into it because that's important when it comes to understanding the research, because especially within the scientific literature and more like let's even look at just research in Canada, research in the States, research in Western cultures. Yoga is often understood as just a physical practice.
Yeah.
And it's not. When you look at like yoga asana, the physical positions of yoga, is only about 2% of the Yoga Sutras. That's
Wow,
it.
2%.
Everything.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And so when it's really tough, even looking at the scientific literature, to differentiate what are they doing? Because in some types of studies, for example, they have found unbelievable results where they're having people, for example, and I'll provide you with the citations for all of these, just so you know. So people, if they want to go look them up, please do, because
Say less.
I always encourage people to go do their own research into things as well, because it's changing every day.
Totally.
But for example, there was one study where they were actually having people for 4 weeks practice 45 minutes a day for 6 days a week. So it is intense, right? Like 6 45-minute practices every week for 4 weeks.
Totally.
But they found it was a 27% reduction in perceived stress and a 38% improvement in sleep quality. Wow. This was self-reported. So they were doing like these studies before and having this in 4 weeks. That's it. 4 weeks.
That's a lot.
And
wow. Okay.
And even in my own program, I've seen a 30% reduction in stress, in perceived stress, like having actual questionnaires that they fill out before and after and during, and that's in 12 weeks. But come to this first study. So there's studies like that where it's just like we're starting to see, for yoga specifically, how unbelievable this is, right? With such low risks.
Yeah.
But then you look at some studies and they just kind of would tell people like, oh, okay, just go practice a couple times a week. And then they didn't find the best results. They didn't tell them where to practice, how to practice, who to practice with. They didn't really, like really start to kind of get informed with true yoga, I would say, right?
Okay.
And just not having it as much like informed and like what kind of yoga practices are they actually engaging in?
Totally.
And when it comes to mindfulness, well, that's a whole other realm in itself.
Yeah.
They're starting to use mindfulness and different mindfulness approaches for everything nowadays.
Yeah.
Like they're finding cancer treatment has better uptake when people are practicing mindfulness.
Absolutely.
They're finding bones are healing faster. Like if you were to break your arm, that's why I think my arm, when I broke it in my yoga teacher training, I was doing handstands by the end of the teacher training.
No kidding. Oh, wow.
It was a 3-month training. Like it was kind of expanded.
Totally.
But
still, that's impressive. As a kinesiology background student, that's impressive. That's huge.
It's all, and I really do think, right? Like when your body keeps score, and when you're in a better place, it will heal differently and it will change and respond to what you're doing.
Totally. Oh, I love that. So you mentioned something that was really interesting was when the what, how, and why aren't defined, it doesn't give people direction to understand like where to go, where to start. So as far as again, the what, the how, the why, what do you recommend or like what do you tell people when they're looking for those components of starting a yoga practice or mindfulness practice?
Oh, the counselor is going to come out and you're not going to like this. No one probably does. And no one ever does. But there's no way. There's no one right way. And I think that is really what I emphasize even in my programming is that like you have to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
And everybody's body is going to respond differently to different practices. Some people, for example, if we're, Dr. Huberman talks a lot about this on his podcast when it comes to mindfulness, but that introspection and extroception, pardon me,
Mm-hmm.
and how in tune with your body you are, and like how in tune with the outside world you are.
Yeah.
And for example, if someone is really interoceptive, they're really inside their body, and then you tell them to sit and do a body scan and focus on the breath and focus on your heart rate and do all this stuff, you're going to send them into an anxiety attack. Like they are already so close to their self. And providing practices or encouraging practices that put them more on that interoception, like bring them more in tune to themselves, you're going off, like you are going to go off the rockers. And that's why, if you've had experience with anxiety attacks or panic attacks,
Mm-hmm.
when you start to be like, think, oh my gosh, I'm having a panic attack. Oh my gosh, and my heart's racing. Am I dying? All that stuff
Totally.
gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
100%.
And so someone like that would benefit more from a mindfulness practice that focuses attention outside their body.
Oh my gosh. Okay. See that, okay, that's huge right there because we preach so much like go inwards, right?
Mhm.
But I think that doesn't take into account people who really struggle with that or the, that it's not like the switch flips and all of a sudden you're looking inwards. Like there's so many layers to surpass before you can do that and sit in that comfortably. So what is that exteroception? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
What does that look
Yeah.
like? Oh.
So if someone were to kind of be like, if they were more focused like externally,
Mm-hmm.
that's usually that overwhelm, like that overstimulation. Oftentimes, again, online, there's a lot of people talk about ADHD and autism right now online.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There are some, that's a whole different discussion in itself when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
that. But speaking of, if you think so, go see a mental health professional. Just
Yeah.
emphasizing that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to that, like there's a reason, right? It's that overstimulation because
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
your brain is taking in too much information from your external surroundings. It is way too focused on the sounds, the pinging of your phone, the having your social media scrolling that while Netflix is on, while the music is on, while someone's trying to talk to you, like that is so overstimulating. We don't realize it. And so if someone is completely outside their body, what's going to help? Well, probably something that brings them more internally. And that's when like focusing on the breath, grounding, that can be a lot more beneficial. But I think that's when like a big part of that is having that emotional and that body awareness and regulation to know what you need and when. Because you don't just sit somewhere. Sometimes you hang out in a certain area on that. You're talking about like a scale. It's not a scale, but we'll think of it like that.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
So you kind of hang out in a certain area, but you're always going to be moving. And depending on what your goal is, then your practice is going to change. And that's where I think when you kind of wrap it back to the research, right? That's where some of those issues come up, where they see different benefits and different things happening, and the results are all different. And there's no like yoga for all, yes, but there's no one type of yoga for every person.
Mm-hmm. I love that you described it as a scale because I think that I talk to a lot of people who say, well, I'm not good at meditating or I'm not good at yoga because I can't achieve that like fully introspective, I don't hear anything else state that I think it's painted as. But I think what you just said there really clicked with me because no, even like every time you do yoga, every time you sit down for meditation, every time you journal, it's not the same, right?
Mhm.
Like it depending on what's going on in your internal, external world, how you're feeling, how deep you're willing to get on a given day, because you're not obliged to go into the depths every single
Nor
day.
should you every day.
Nor
That's
should
not good for
you.
you either.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's a huge piece to bring into the conversation because I think that when people can understand it as that kind of spectrum of you can sit within that scale on a day-to-day however you're feeling,
Mhm.
it removes the shame from like, oh well, I'm not good at meditating because I can't achieve that's like super deep beta theta wave state like every time that we associate it as. So
Yeah.
I just love that you drew attention to that because I think that will bring people a lot of peace of mind when they know that it doesn't look like one thing. It can look like whatever works for you at a given time. So
Yes. Well,
mhm.
and that's where that, like we said, that awareness and regulation comes in and that's why, so even in my program, like within there's 8 modules that I teach within the 12 weeks, and 4 of the modules, so half of the education piece of my program is focused on emotional and body awareness and regulation.
Mm-hmm.
As it's not just about like the mental health and that stuff. And that is part of yoga practice. And I think that's what often gets kind of forgotten, is that being able to tune into yourself in any which way is part of yoga. Like yoga is unity. It's having that really essence of being one with yourself and really kind of refinding that light inside of you. And that is what comes where that yoga piece comes in. And yoga doesn't have to just be doing handstands and getting into the funkiest positions. And it can be, because that might be pushing yourself, but there's also that other piece of yoga that often gets forgotten. But then flip side of that, you don't have to be able to do all that to practice yoga. And your brain responds to, like you talked about neuroplasticity, right? That's how your brain is.
Totally.
Your brain engages in neuroplasticity when there's new and novel things going on. Right? That's why people love travel, because you're starting to experience things that it does start to change the brain. But then you start to look at mindfulness, and it's the same thing. Every time your mind wanders, that is a perfect opportunity to bring your attention back. And that is where change happens, when you bring it back. It's okay. Your brain is supposed to wander. You're just supposed to try to, every time it wanders, you bring it back, bring the attention back, whether it be in focusing on your internal sensations or focusing on something externally. Every time the mind wanders, that is the practice.
Totally. Well, and isn't that self-awareness at its core, right? Like, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I ever heard around meditating and mindfulness was your mind will only ever go quiet when you're dead. Right? And that removed so much like angst around it for me, because I was like, why can't I just let it be quiet? Why don't the thoughts just stop? It's like, that's not the goal. The goal is to be able to develop that sense of control when they start to wander, other than somewhere else than where you want them to go, So I like that. And I think it's important to have that distinction, because that isn't the goal of meditating, nor yoga, nor mindfulness. It's about developing that sense of awareness to bring yourself back when you're wandering elsewhere. So,
and like making that, like having discernment, right? And recognizing when to bring yourself back, because especially when it comes to any kind of trauma in itself is this whole thing. Trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens within you. And so when your body has some sort of physical response to a trigger, it might not be safe for you to do the healing right now, because your environment might not be set up for you. And so I think when it comes to mindfulness too, some people really don't like meditation and mindfulness because they don't, like, they feel like they get more anxious with it. Okay, there's other ways to practice mindfulness that's not that can actually help, right? And I think that's where it's really important to emphasize, like, and I often, even in my classes, say, like, if you don't like sitting still, if that makes you feel really uncomfortable, or closing your eyes, don't do it. Sway side to side, bring movement, and you need to move the energy in your body, right? Maybe you don't need to sit in stillness. Maybe that's exactly the worst thing for your body right now, like, right?
Totally.
So that's when, like, you ask the question, like, what are these practices people should do? And it's like, there's no answer to that.
No. And I think that it's a huge, like, I always say that education is the first step into any kind of change, right? Like, I think any kind of personal growth is painted as like, we'll just start doing stuff. No, there's actually quite a bit of a period where you're supposed to sit down, talk to people, read about things, so that you can land on the things that pique your interest and try those until you land on something that works, and then change again. Right? And that's the beautiful part, is getting the opportunity to try modalities that work for you. And once you work through some, you might move to others, but there's always, always, always education involved before change can happen. So,
And just getting curious with it, right? Because like I was saying, in this program, like, I don't just teach one way, I teach a bunch of different like mindfulness skills and strategies. And that's why I'm putting that mini course out, because that's one question I get often asked, like, okay, well, if I don't want to just sit in meditation, what do I do? And so I have put together a resource for that, because there isn't just one way. And going through different practices and trying different things, getting curious about what you like and what you don't like, that is where that change is going to happen. So that when things do go whatever which way, you know what to do about it, and you have things to lean back on, and your brain is primed because you already know when you're wanting to use these things.
Yep, exactly. I have so much that I want to ask you still, and so little time.
No, right? I feel like
So
we could talk for hours on this.
we
Like
could talk for
I
hours.
can talk for 12 weeks on this, right? Like I do.
And
So
that's why you're doing it, and that's why we're here.
this is
So,
why I'm here.
and that's how you do what you do. I love it. Um, okay, what I wanted to ask you was
Mhm.
you're helping a lot of people with mindfulness and to develop mindfulness practice in their life. What does that look like for you in your life?
Mindfulness practice. Oh, I love that question. And I think that's where it's really important to emphasize that your practice is supposed to ebb and flow. It's never going to be the same. And I think some people get so stuck, especially seeing things online like build your habits, do this, do that, build your routine. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. But also have some flexibility with it. And so
Mm-hmm.
my own practice, I don't have just like one specific practice similar to how I teach,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like during different periods of my life, and especially being a woman and having different periods of my month,
Mm-hmm.
I will
Yeah.
have different things that I need. And so just as like a summary of things that I do, journaling is always a really big outlet for me. I do love to
Mm-hmm.
journal, whether it be just dumping my thoughts, whether it be practicing gratitude. That's one I've been really doing a lot lately in my mornings and making sure I'm writing down, I am grateful for dot, 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 not just listing
Mm-hmm.
them.
Totally.
Because
Yeah.
gratitude is really good for your brain, just so you know.
Right?
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah.
It is. It's good for your
Mhm.
temporal lobe and
Mhm.
helps change. Anyway,
Yes. Yes.
back to my practice. One of the things that also I really like to do is focusing, like doing actual seated meditations. Breath work is a really good one I've been into a lot lately as well. Um, I think just in terms of like mindfulness is also just how you go about your day. And that's really what
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness is, right? It doesn't always have to take time out of your day. But what I've been doing a lot lately is like when I go for walks with my dog, I will make sure try to notice three things I've never noticed before. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, scratch on a branch, the way the leaves look, something in the grass. I don't know, right? Like it can be anything. There's endless things. Um, that's my mindfulness practice for me. And then on top of that, when we're going to bring it back to relationships, it's also really being present with my partner and with other people in my life and making
Mm-hmm.
sure that I'm surrounding myself with people that fill my heart, because that is mindfulness, right? Because when you are with people that you are just fully engaged with, like even stuff like this,
Mm-hmm.
so in the flow, and you're just, like that, you are so present. And I think that is also a big thing to recognize. Like you and I just even talking here sometimes, not focus on 12 million different things, phone ping in the background. Like that is being mindful. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where it's supposed to emphasize that mindfulness is not just a specific practice. There are mindfulness practices, but mindfulness is how you go about your day and being intentional with your attention, with your energy. And yeah.
Totally. I was just about to say, like, I think that the shift in narrative that has to happen is from practice to lifestyle when it comes
Mhm.
to that, right? Because it is like the intentionality with which you approach your day. It is how you choose to put distractions away. It is how you choose to carve out time for yourself. Like that is mindfulness. And it isn't just the 5 minutes that you sit down to meditate. It is like
Mhm.
how you approach your entire day. So I love that because I also think that it takes the stress out of you. Like I have to find 1 hour to do this. It's like, no,
Yeah.
it's a whole day thing. So
Yeah.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
especially when it comes to moving your body, it's the same way. Like I love to go to longer practices, right? Like I'm talking 60, 75 minute plus kind of stuff. I do love that.
Mhm.
But
Totally.
that's not realistic for a lot of people, and even myself a lot of the time, right? Like even
Totally.
as a yoga teacher, I am in my master's. I am busy.
Yeah.
And so sometimes dancing in your kitchen can be moving your body, like
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
putting a good song on and just jamming, like your heart rate gets up. If I mean the way I dance, my heart rate gets up. So, but when it
Totally.
comes to even like moving your body, like yes, yoga is really important because there is a lot of that research behind it. There's a lot of tradition behind it, and that's also important to
Yes.
recognize and to address and
Mhm.
recognize that I am still a student in it as well, but
Yeah.
it is part of it, right? And I think
Totally.
moving your body however it needs to move, practicing mindfulness however you need to practice, that's really
Mhm.
what it's like. That's where that freedom comes to. And um the last round of NIM that I ran, even we had a really big conversation at the end, and
Mhm.
recognizing how like core beliefs have shifted throughout the program for this one individual.
Mm, mhm.
And one of them is recognizing that like you're not going to do the same thing every day, and that it's a good thing when things start to shift, because maybe that means that you're getting better. And
Oh my
maybe that means you don't need more practice, you need less, because you can get the same
God.
results from less time. It takes you less time to sit and get really into your practice. Used to take 45 minutes for you to actually get there, but now it takes 10. I don't know. Right.
Totally, totally. And it's about noticing those small changes too, right? Like um I think that's huge, and thinking about shifts as a step in the right direction, not that it's not working for you anymore or that you need to find something else, but rather like there's grace in sitting in the shift and like seeing
Mhm.
what has come of it and seeing how you've changed as a result of it, because like that's the whole point of these
Yeah.
practices. So, oh, I love that. That must have been such a stimulating conversation.
Yeah. It was
Yeah,
wonderful. And that's
I love
that's
that.
what it's all about, right? It's about talking about life.
Totally.
And I
That's so
think
rewarding for you too. That's
it
huge.
is.
Yeah.
And that's where some of that counselor kind of style comes in, right? Because it
Mhm.
is educating. Like a big part of what I do is educate people on the brain and on how mindfulness and yoga shift your mind, shift your brain, shift your life really in
Totally.
general.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But a big part of it is I'm going through the journey myself. And like I had,
Mm-hmm.
there was that trigger warning. Like I even have a lot of my own trauma in the past that I've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was actually a lot of sexual trauma. And so for that, it
Mm-hmm.
took a ton of work. It took years, right?
Yeah.
To start to get to a place where I felt comfortable enough to really sit in my practice. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that is where you don't always have to be fixing yourself. Sometimes fixing yourself is just being present and being okay with the chapter that you're in. And so right now, even where I'm in right this moment,
Mm-hmm.
my practice is going to look very different than even 3 months from now. I don't
Yes.
know what it's going to look like. I don't,
Totally.
but
And that's the
I
beauty of
trust
it
that it's going to
too.
be a practice and it's going to be what it needs to be. So
Totally. As you evolve, your practice evolves. And I think it's so wonderful that you have that direct testimony of it took me time before I could sit here. And people need to hear that. People need to get that. People need to understand that it's going to be a journey that isn't going to look like everybody else's. But also the timeline will look different based on what you went through, what you think you can tolerate right now, and where you want to get to. Because you don't have to have a goal for what it has to look like or the result of it right now either. So,
yeah.
mhm. Oh,
And that's what it's all about,
that
right?
is what it's all about. I love that. I could talk to you all day.
I
I love
know.
this so much. I know. We're gonna
We need
need
to
we need
we
12
need
podcast
yeah.
episodes. We need 12 weeks.
We need 12 weeks. Seriously.
No, exactly. And that's what we're gonna do. That's what you're gonna do. So
Yes.
the tradition on the podcast here is
Okay.
that every guest, I know it's your first time. I'm so
Oh my
excited that it's your first
goodness.
time. I hope this doesn't scare you away. But
Never.
the tradition here on Commitment to Growth is that every guest gets 3 rapid fire questions at the end. The first 2 are the same for every guest. The last one is unique to them.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. First one is, what song is currently stuck in your head?
All is well. I don't know who the artist is, but I'm playing that. I'm teaching yoga tonight and that was
Love
in my
it.
head.
Yeah.
That's the first one that came to my mind.
All
Okay.
as well. Is it like an instrumental song or
No,
is
it's
it?
like a very like soulful music. Like I put it in my class a lot of the time.
Gotcha.
Um, don't know who the artist is. I wish I did.
Oh, that's fine.
I'll send it to you.
Amazing. I will. It'll be in
It's
the
called
show
All
notes,
Is Well
folks.
and it's great. Look it up.
It'll be in the show notes, folks. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay. Question 2 is, what is your favorite quote?
What is my favorite quote? Growing old is mandatory, growing up is optional.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's so wild that you just said that, because I literally, my phone today, I use Insight Timer for meditation, and
Yes.
it gives you a daily quote every single day. And today's was, change is inevitable, but growth is optional. And that's just,
Oh,
we were in
yeah,
sync, basically.
we
It was
were.
meant to happen. I love that. Okay, ready for
Yeah,
your one? That was
I'm
so
ready.
rapid fire. Good for you. So
I
most
want
people stumble a little bit.
it.
I could not do rapid fire. So my respects. Your last one is, what is your favorite yoga pose, if
What is
any?
my favorite yoga pose? Oh
I
my
know.
goodness. Like yoga asana pose. Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna just go with it, but Shavasana.
I was
I
gonna
love
say the
it.
same thing.
There are lots, but I gotta
Yeah.
say that is one thing that is part of most of my practices. And
No,
so
100%. Do you want to explain that to people who don't know what
yes,
because that's my
Shavasana.
favorite too. But
Yes. It is where you are lying on your back oftentimes your palms are facing up, you are in a receiving position, legs are relaxed, just laying on the floor. And I think that's where it's part of very like opening your chest, heart opening, feeling the ground and the support of the mat below you. It's really where you get to just let your mind be because your body is still.
Beautiful. We see eye to eye on that. I love the laying part personally, but
I used to be like a super intense. And like, if you are into this, like, this is not a shot to you. This is just my practice has evolved this way. And
totally.
Yours may or may not. But for me, like, I used to be like all about like workout yoga, you know, like super intense. Like, again, I do love a good arm balance. Don't get me wrong. Love a good inversion. But like my practice has really evolved to really become a lot more slower, a lot more more on like the mental, like on the actual mindfulness practice itself, going beyond just the asana and really kind of exploring the philosophy of it, because that is really where yoga starts to get just mind-boggling, how people were conceptualizing this stuff thousands of years ago.
Totally. Oh, I need to work on that more, because for me, like, it's just that some of the stretches still hurt. So it's really hard to like get out of that and back into the mind. But I think that's the beautiful part of it, is that once you master that, it's way more like it's more holistic practice rather than just the flexibility or body practice too, right? So that's my takeaway for today, for sure.
It's all part of it.
It's all part of it. Where can people find you after this? Because they're gonna want to. I'm positive.
I love it. Oh, thank you. Well, so all my programs are online. So 3 different ways. Don't know timing wise if it'll work for the workshop, but I do every now host online workshops. They're just like one-offs. I do have another one this Wednesday. But by the time this is out, it'll be past that. So
next one.
Keep your eyes open for the next workshop.
Fantastic.
I do have an online free 6-week journal. If you ever want to just download that, it's automatic. It's just from my website. It's from my link on my profile. Third way, I do have a coming out on the mindfulness skills and strategies that we discuss and practice in NIYM. So that will be like breaking down each one and allowing you to practice that. So that's where they can find me on there. And then the 12-week program, right? Like, I run these a few times a year. My next one starts middle of September, and I do have spots open. And so if that is something that interests you, let's just get connected. Let's chat one-on-one, because being a group program, it is about the group, right? And it's not like there has to be like, you don't worry about like vetting and all this. It's not like that. It's just mainly to kind of make sure that this is right for people and that it is what they're looking for.
Totally. And the connection part too is so important. We love it. We love it.
But Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest.
Amazing. Yes. All of Kelsey's stuff will be linked in the show notes, everybody, so you can find it there too. Kelsey, this was so lovely. Thank you for being here. Congratulations on your first podcast interview. Nobody would know. I wouldn't even know. You killed it.
I love it. This is what I do. This is my jam.
We hope to have you back in due time, and we'll be in touch for sure.
Thank you so much for honestly, like, truly thank you for that conversation, because I think it's always, that's why we do what we do, right? It's why we do it with others and just having real conversations. So thank you for inviting me to Commitment to Growth, and thank you for just everyone listening. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. It was lovely. Thank you for tuning in this week, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I hope it left your mind full. No pun intended. I hope that was funny as it did mine. I hope you took as much away from that conversation as I did as well, and that you're inspired to continue doing your inner work, maybe through something differently, through movement exploration, because that is what we're here to do. We're here to embrace the journey that it is to becoming our authentic selves, our most truest selves, in ways that are fun and inspiring as well. It doesn't always have to be hard and emotionally crushing and grieving. No. We're here to do it the right way. So if you are interested in more conversations like this in the future, hit like, subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcast platform you're listening onto. Share this conversation with a friend who you think might find it helpful or inspiring. follow the podcast and my personal platform, Commitment to Growth, on Instagram and TikTok. It's at Commitment to Growth. If you want to learn more about my coaching services, how I approach resilience coaching differently than what is seen in the coaching industry right now, you can head over to my website. It is www.commitmenttogrowth.com, and I outline the approach that I take to helping you work towards your goals, whether it is personal, social, and relationships in your professional life. I'm your girl to do so. I want to help you. So head on over there, check it out. Shoot me a message on Instagram if you have any questions. Otherwise, let's hop on a call. And I'd be super happy to answer those questions for you and to get to know you a little bit better. So that is the episode for this week. Thank you for being here as always, and I will see you in the next episode.